We're off. Hello again, everybody. This is my next episode of the Fork in the Road podcast. Today, with the amazingly energetic Lou Walker, we're going to try and absorb some of your vibes. And I noticed that Lou was on her standing desk, so I've put mine into standing mode. So we're going to see how that how that influences how we go. So, just a really brief introduction, because Lou's going to tell us a lot more about how she got to be doing what she's doing today and what's going on currently and maybe next plans. So Lou's a registered health coach specialising in weight loss without hunger, which is so fantastically important. None of us are ever going to stay in remission from food and sugar addiction if we're hungry all the time. It's against human nature, isn't it? So she uses low carb and real food, and as you know from the Fork in the Road book, that's the approach that we take to help people make changes that they can absolutely stick with. So we're completely aligned in that, Lou, aren't we?
Absolutely are, yeah. I
Yeah,
think
brilliant.
the same stock.
Yes. So you had a really different route into the whole thing. Now, as I was saying, a lot of people that I interview have their own experience of that sugar addiction struggle, and sort of end up in this similar place, and then maybe get to a sort of campaigning zeal, which you've really got. So tell us about how you've got to where you are now. What journeys led you here?
Oh golly, it's quite complicated. I'll try not to ramble on too much.
Okay.
I've always been interested in health, and when I was younger, I wanted to be a doctor. For various reasons, I decided that wasn't going to be the case, but I did get a place to do physiotherapy in the days when you did it at a hospital rather than as a degree. And I have no idea why, but I turned that place down. And I must have had some sort of weird, anyway, I turned it down, but there's always been this interest in health that hasn't left me. Uh,
Mm.
so I was running, I had 15 years in the corporate world, being a management trainer, leadership development consultant, helping people to perform better. But I just had this impression all the time that if I could help them be healthier, they would not only perform better in their work, but in just have a better quality of life. So one way or another, that led me to do a master's in obesity and weight management.
Mm.
And so that's one route into all of this.
Yeah.
But at the same time, that sort of physiotherapy thing never quite left me, and I did train. I qualified about 12 years ago as a sports massage therapist.
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I'm a runner. I call myself an athlete, but I think anybody that does some exercise and maybe does some competition, even if it's park run,
Yeah.
you're an athlete. You're an athlete. But I got quite serious about it because I do get a bit obsessive. So I ended up doing Ironman triathlon, which for anybody that doesn't, I mean, it's not a sensible thing to do. I really don't need it, but it was in my head, and I was determined to do it. So an Ironman triathlon, you swim. I can't even remember the distances now. You swim for about 2.5 miles.
Yeah.
You jump on a bike and cycle for 112 miles or something, and then you run a marathon.
Yeah.
And so obviously having the right nutrition, it's not just all about training and doing the running and the cycling. You need the right nutrition to keep you going for a long time. I mean,
It's
somebody like
incredible.
me, yeah, I'm out there for 13 hours, something like that. So nutrition is really important. And I found I'd done various marathons and things before, so I thought I had an iron stomach when it came to things like that. But the Ironman was different. And for my first two Ironman triathlons, I ended up on a drip afterwards. I mean, so did lots of other people.
Wow.
But I was so frustrated. Well, I was really dehydrated and,
Yeah.
sick, and I was fine the next day, but it wasn't right. I was determined that wasn't going to happen again. And I vaguely came across the idea of not using carbohydrate. And
Yeah.
I thought I was being very science focused and evidence based in spending a fortune, frankly, on gels and things to get my to fuel my Ironman. But clearly, it wasn't helping me because I felt rubbish at the
But
end of it.
that was the advice at the time. It's like Tim Noakes says now, doesn't it? He was advocating that stuff. He was probably one of the world experts at the time. Everybody was doing it. I mean, I've never done anything like you. We used to do half marathons back in the day. And yet gels were littering the course. You know, everybody had these special, you had a special belt with all your little sugary gels. I mean, it
Yes.
was partly why I ran, to be honest, as an excuse to have the sugary gels.
You're so right. So I can't honestly remember quite how I came across it, but the idea, I mean, I used to listen to a load of podcasts, and, you know, the idea started to form that, anyway, suffice to say, my third and last Ironman, I did it on a handful of almonds. And on the run, I did have half a banana and about 3 jelly babies, but that was it. That was it. And that was my best one. And I wasn't on a drip
And that's
afterwards.
the last bit, isn't it? The run is the last bit. So yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. So,
Wow.
so
So
I realised there was something in it.
you're a super fat burner, and the other amazing example of that is Zach Bitter, isn't it? Who's the guy? He's an American guy who's won the 100-mile record for running, and he does it like this, like kind of low carb, fat fueled, basically fueled by his own fat. So
Well, loads of people do now.
yeah,
It was really, you know, thought of as a bit bonkers, but now loads of people do it.
yeah,
So, but that was my route into it, and you know, so what with learning more about keto, I suppose I did try to be keto, but I'm not sure that I really was, to be honest. But anyway, you know, cutting out the carbs and so on. And at the same time, doing the masters in obesity and weight management, and having this amazing opportunity to learn how to having access to the evidence, and being able to learning about how to understand it, interpret it, and make up my own mind about it.
yes.
That was fantastic. So these things came together, the sort of the Ironman, and then swimming, fueling swims, and
obviously, as you say, that underlying kind of interest in the human body and how it works. It sounds like you've always had that, and the like you say, then the opportunity to really look into the science and learn how to sift through the nonsense.
yeah, it's hard. I'm not sure I've really got it, but I mean, I think all that science that I thought I was understanding when I was filling myself full of carbohydrate, I thought, yeah, I didn't really understand about, you know, the concept of, you know, there are two sides, or there might be several sides to a question, and one side, just because it's the one that's salient, that you can see easily, it might shout loudest, but it might not be correct.
Yeah, always keeping an open mind about stuff, really. Yeah. So tell us about that, because the first time I came across you was at the PHC, obviously, and your stuff on office cake culture, and it really rang with me because I worked in the NHS for 32 years, and I think the NHS is probably one of, if not the offending offending organisation in this culture where I don't know how we've got to this place where there's kind of every day is cupcake day, really. So tell us about how you came to do the research, and something about your findings. And I know it's gone really, you know, that's something that has caught people's imaginations. Yeah, so just tell me about that project.
Well, because when I started doing my masters, I had been in the corporate world for so long. My plan was to use whatever I learned in the corporate, you know, from my masters, to take and go back into the corporate world to, you know, do health and well-being or something like that, which would have been fine. So I wanted to do a research project that was relevant to the corporate world. And most of the people doing the masters, they were doctors or nurses or physios or public health specialists or something. So I was the only person from the corporate world, but I wanted to do a project that was relevant to that. And I can't remember how I hit on office cake, but it just seemed so blimmin' obvious. And my super, I think they were a bit, they thought I was slightly strange at first, my supervisors and so on, but they were up for it and were very supportive. And I'm not a psychologist, but you know, an awful lot of psychology came into it. So it went down to the, you know, I delved a lot into the idea of social influencing and how much we're influenced by the people around us, and that sort of thing. So I did a survey of, in the end, I've got 1,000 respondents all people working in the offices in the UK. And I just asked them loads of questions, designed a huge questionnaire, which asked about what the office snacking culture was like in their workplace, what their own office cake snacking behaviour was, and what they thought about it in general. And it was absolutely fascinating, because what the override, there's so much that came out of it, and we eventually got it published in the International Journal of Workplace Health Management.
Yeah, and we'll link and your other project, which we'll talk about. I'll definitely link those for you on the website. I think it's open access, isn't it?
The second one is, the BMJ is, but not. Okay. But if you can still get the whole paper from our website, because I've got it. Yeah, I've got it.
Okay. Well, we've got we'll definitely link to Lou's website. So if anybody wants to follow up and actually read the papers, they can do that.
Yeah. Well, the cake one's quite long, but I think the overriding message is that 95% of people thought that the ideal frequency, ridiculous word, but the ideal frequency for having office cake was once a week or less. So 95%
That's amazing.
of people thought, once a week or less was enough. So then you're thinking, well, why are we having it every single day, or almost every single day? And then it comes into, well, nobody really wants to stick their head up above the parapet if you can see everybody else enjoying it. You're not going to be the killjoy that says, I don't think we should do this. So we just keep quiet.
It's like the Emperor's New Clothes, isn't it? Everyone's sitting around going, "Oh, thanks for the cupcakes, Joyce." And actually, they're all thinking, "Oh God, I wish you wouldn't bring those in, because I can't turn you down, either for social reasons or because I just can't resist that kind of stuff once I see it."
Exactly. And I think that was so important. And so I thought, what could we do to try, and I thought it was important to try and explore what can be done in workplaces to get a conversation going, so that people understood that the chances were they were all thinking the same thing, but didn't feel comfortable voicing it.
Yeah.
And I thought that it was really important, perhaps, that employers engaged with this to provide the opportunity. I mean, Corporate Health and Wellbeing Week or whatever, let's have some discussions. Let's, help people to do their own version of the survey so they can find out what people think in their office. Never mind, not relying on research, but thinking about what the cases are in their situation, and then coming up with some ideas together collaboratively to do something about it. Because the obvious thing is sort of, well, if none of us want it, why are we doing it? And then the other thing, so there's very serious about why that might happen, and what you could do with it. But essentially, I didn't really get anywhere with that. There was a massive amount of interest in it, but it's not much good unless you can get employers engaged. And I don't know whether I had the right skills or the right way of influencing employers to get them to engage with it. And I think because we're so emotionally wound up in food, and we never, sharing food is a really important thing. We celebrate with food. It's a wonderful way to be together and show generosity and kindness and friendship. It's really important part of our society, isn't it?
It's a form of communication, isn't it? Yeah,
exactly. So I'm sure that employers are just worried about being seen to take that away.
Yeah,
but I think
it's a bit like the government talking about taxes on things that people like, isn't it? So it's a bit like the government are really reluctant to do the old sugar tax because they don't want to be seen as killjoys, or somehow getting at people who that's their kind of one treat that they can afford because it's so affordable. And I guess employers don't want it to be seen as a kind of preachy punishment.
And I utterly get that. I think anybody would get that. But at the same time, as with public health, as you've just said, with the sugar tax and in the corporate world, actually, where does it get us if we don't do something about it? It doesn't actually help. And I think it would be wrong to go in and say, right, that's it, we're banning cake. There'd be an uproar. I don't think we need to, because people are saying, let's have it once a week. And it'd be great. And we can all get together. We can all look forward to it. We can all get to have a chat with each. I mean, I don't know, maybe things have moved on because of COVID and people aren't going to work in the same way.
True.
There is that question.
That will have changed things, wouldn't it? And then it's like how people managing managing their own cravings, if you like, and what they bring into their own homes, that's the issue. Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, have you got any advice to? I mean, maybe somebody's listening who that is an issue in their workplace, and they're wondering how to start that conversation. Have you heard of any success stories, or kind of coached anyone who's been in that situation of actually they're an employee in a workplace where they personally would quite like to change the culture? Have you got any tips at all for how to start that conversation? Or
it can be a difficult one, but if it's in the context of health anyway, and I mean, last week, this wasn't about cake, but last week I was talking to a very large company. They were having they call it tea and talk. And because, I mean, this was organized by the HR sort of team,
yeah,
and all their people are working from home, but they're very aware of the fact that that still means there is a thing around workplace health and well-being is important. Just because people aren't in the office, they still need to look after them.
yes.
So there are opportunities like that. I mean, talking about health is so much more prevalent these days in companies, and it's in the talking about mental ill health and anxiety, and we all know about the links between obesity and our excess risk from COVID. So it is easier, and I think it's a responsibility, actually, I mean, of employers to they do need to start the conversation.
Yeah.
So there are lots of ways that they can start the conversation, but as I said, if the conversation was around, okay, it's clear, how do we make this workplace healthy? And just about every workplace employee organization will say that that's the case, whether it's the CIPD, the Department of Work and Pensions, all the workplace organizations, they will all say in their values and mission that it's important, it's the responsibility of the employers to make it easy for their employees to make healthy decisions. I mean, there's no argument about that. They'll all recognize that.
Yes.
And so there's lots of stuff about, helping people take the stairs, not the lift, and having healthy options in the canteen, which is great. That's fantastic. But you're kind of throwing all that away if you're welcoming a sort of big sugar fest into your office every day.
Into the by the kettle, there's always something, and then people are very cued by that when they, you're having a stressful day, aren't you? And it's not about willpower. It's about being completely triggered by seeing that food. And yeah.
Yes, and if your willpower is, if the cakes are lying there and somebody sent a lovely email saying, oh, it's my birthday today, there are some, I've put a load of Krispy Kreme in meeting room 1 or whatever, and somebody thinks, right, well, I'm not going past meeting room 1 today, but come 4 o'clock in the afternoon when their willpower has been used up and they're running on empty, it's really hard to avoid. So there is a real disconnect between employers' intentions, and everybody wants people to be healthy and happy at work. But it is that question of it being a little bit difficult to, you don't want to come across as the bad guy and the killjoy. But I don't think it's difficult to start a conversation. And I think it starts with the conversation, and employers are in a good position to start a conversation. Yeah. I mean, one example from another organization I was doing a workshop for, and this is around cakes as a sort of reward, recognition, motivation, and one woman who I think worked in the accounts department, financials, and she said, honestly, at the end of every quarter, all the team have to work really hard. They don't get much in the way of lunch hour. The least I can do is get them some sort of present gift to keep them going, because I want them to know that they're appreciated. Mm-hmm. And which is lovely. And of course, cake is cheap and easy, and
it doesn't have to be cake, does it? That's the point.
Well, and that's the thing. One person piped up and said, well, I know what I'd prefer. She said, I prefer time, because if I knew that, okay, I was working really hard and late for a couple of weeks, if I knew that I could come in late or have a longer lunch hour or have a half day afterwards, that would be really valuable.
Wow. Yes. Yeah. Brilliant.
So that's the thing, if you have a conversation and you ask people what they would like and make it easy for them to find out. I mean, if you're going to do a sort of survey amongst your team, make it confidential, don't
Yes.
make it anonymous.
Yeah.
Then everybody can say what they really think.
Exactly what they think.
Yeah.
Totally. Yeah. So, just to say people to sort of feel empowered as an individual to go and have that conversation with their, maybe with their fellows, but then also with their managers to say, we'd prefer this. Thank you very much.
Well, isn't it great if it was to start? I have seen it start in one team. I did a TED talk about it ages ago, and a lady found it. I didn't know her at the time. She found it and explained it to her team of 10 people or something. And every week they had a team meeting, and she always took a cake because she thought that was a nice thing to do. And of course it's a nice thing to do. But they were also, anyway, it ended up that she explained a little bit about this research as a result of the TED talk to her team. And she said, shall we do a secret, an anonymous ballot to find out what we think? And, because should I keep bringing the cake in or not? And they said, actually, we don't have to worry about a secret ballot. Let's just, and somebody was just honest, because she created the opportunity for somebody to respond. She made it easy for them. Yeah. One by one, they all spoke up and said, oh, it's so nice of you, it's so kind, we really appreciate it, but actually I'm trying to lose weight, or I'm trying. And because she brought it up, I mean, you could even start it off by saying, like this lady did, I don't know quite what to think, but there was this research that said,
yes.
And then there's no blame. You can separate yourself from it, but it can be, you're not talking about your own thoughts, you're citing some research and saying, what do you think? What do we think? And that spread, that was one team. And then that started to spread throughout the organization.
Yeah, it's like
it doesn't have to be top down, it can be bottom up.
That's what I like about this world, really, is that a lot of the solutions are bottom up, but then it's like a virus. And that's when we're kind of feeling, right, the problem's so massive in the world, what do we do? Actually, one of the solutions is just do something. Just start a conversation, just tell people what you're doing. Like you say, it's not about ramming it down people's throats, really, but it's about opening up some lines of conversation. Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. And that thing about throwing, doing what you can do, it can be overwhelming, can't it? Because if you've got a little bit of knowledge about any topic, and if it's a challenging topic like public health is, as an individual, you can, especially a non-clinician, you can feel very angry and passionate, but totally overwhelmed by, how on earth am I ever going to tackle this huge big thing? And the answer is, you don't have to, just do something. Yeah. And then you realize there are lots of other people doing something, and then you meet up and you join together, because it's hard doing it by yourself. But
yeah, 100%. Yeah, no, definitely. And in terms of meeting up, with perhaps recommend people, keep an eye on the public health collaboration, which we might talk about a little bit more, but that is an organization of people who have this exact attitude. And if you can stomach it, Twitter's a great place to follow people, and even if you don't want to join in, kind of see what's going on. I'm a big fan of Clubhouse. I don't know if you've discovered Clubhouse, Lou. We might have to have you on. I do a group.
No, I haven't.
It's a sort of talk. It's like a bit like talk radio, and you have a room at a set time. And I've got one. I mean, you can do them anytime, but mine's Wednesday at 6 p.m. and we talk about is broadly food addiction, sugar addiction. But there's lots of real.
I heard about
groups. There's low carb
groups. You need an Apple phone.
You need an Apple phone for now. It's coming on Android soon. So maybe by the time people are watching this, it should be. Are you Android? So I can't invite you.
I am, because I'm on the steering committee for the Real Food campaign, and they were talking about Clubhouse as well. But until it's not just Apple. But that sounds brilliant.
Yes, no, it's really, really interesting, and you can just hop into conversations and listen. You don't have to speak at all. You can just sit and listen, like you're listening to the radio and listening to the conversation. So I think I think all the modern social media, they have their problems, but I think they can serve as people with this sort of food addiction, sugar addiction problem often feel really isolated because they're the only one in the family. I mean, they might be the only one in the office who really has that struggle with moderating. I think I probably was in the office that I worked in, and we weren't too bad, but there were a couple of people who were excellent bakers, and they would bring in, like it was someone's birthday, somebody would make these amazing cupcakes, and I had to have several conversations around, that looks beautiful, I really appreciate the effort you've made, I like it, but it doesn't like me, and I can't just have one. So they kind of got used to me in the end, and but you do have to negotiate the fact that they're there, and those kind of discussions. And it's difficult for people to feel like they're the only one. But with social media, you can connect to this whole community of people who've got the same struggles and really get that sense of and support and so on.
Do you
Anyway,
think at work you were the only one, or do you think it's just not the sort of people feel shame, they don't want to admit it?
I
So
think
you're not
I
going
mean
to
I
be.
was in quite a small team, so of the people I'm thinking in that team, they most of them could could moderate, if you like. I kind of saw them do it. They would just have one biscuit or whatever and move on with the day. um, in the wider workplace, there were a number of teams around us, and I definitely, how you kind of recognise people who are a bit like you. Yeah, if there was a Jacob's join is another danger zone, isn't it, for those of us that, because people bring, so we used to do a thing like right, once a year, say, we'd all bring food in and we'd all eat lunch together, which is a lovely thing to do. But
There's another opportunity
it's
instead of
another
having the
opportunity to have the conversation, but also it's a real minefield for people with food addiction, sugar addiction, because they're kind of not in control of what's going to be on the table and what they can choose. So I just used to take a lot of things that I could eat. I mean, loads. I would take loads of, like, say, cold meats or salad or whatever it is that I might have had for lunch anyway, and then however many other people chose off that stuff, there'd always be enough of that for me, and I wouldn't look weird because I wasn't eating nothing, or I just bought my own little box of which you want to join in. So it's, we talk about it quite a bit in the book about the pitfalls of socializing, going to restaurants, buffets, things like that, and how to just manage that. And you must with your clients as well.
Oh, hugely. But it's interesting with clients and also running courses, weight loss, lifestyle courses for the PHC. COVID has been, well, it's been a blessing and a curse, hasn't it? But in some ways, lockdown's been a good opportunity to really get some new habits going, because you haven't had the situation where you're going around to a friend's house and they're saying, oh, go on, or come around for dinner, we're having pizza, and you don't quite feel able to say, can I bring a salad or something?
I can't do that. Yeah, absolutely. No, agreed. Yeah, so there's definitely been some protections around it, and I have spoken to a few people who are getting a bit nervous now because we are coming towards the end of that time and everybody's going to want to socialize, so people have to think really carefully about what conversations they need to have or how they're going to manage those situations. So it's been easier in some ways at home, but then for other people actually being stuck at home, maybe with others in the family who are, cake pushers aren't just at work, they're in the family, aren't there? And we often live with people who are maybe they haven't got to the point yet where they realize they've got a problem, or just that they are people who can moderate, the rare unicorns that can moderate, and so there's stuff in the house, and then that's difficult for people.
It really is. And there's a gender divide as well, isn't there? Have you found that? I mean, I found that in the research, and looking, I wasn't expecting it, in the cake research, but
tell us about that. I'm getting a bit interested in this issue of the differences between men and women who really struggle with sugar and carbohydrate, and how to sort of best pitch it, if you like.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not. I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if it does focus around carbohydrate in particular, but in general, I mean, this is generalizing between the sexes, but it's statistically significant generalizing. Generally, men don't really seem to bother too much about food. Their food is fuel, and if they're hungry, they'll eat it. And if I mean, and they can take it or leave it. And that's certainly what we found with the cake research. Men apparently are not so well, they're not so knowledgeable about food. They're less likely to have been on a diet because they're just not that bothered.
Yeah.
So there's not nearly as much anxiety around food for men. On the other side, with women, and it's probably an evolutionary drive, whether or not this is politically correct to say or not, it's scientifically accurate that women care more about what they look like, because you're possibly to try and attract a mate or, you know, a boyfriend or whatever. So we do care. And we do care what we look like. And because we care and it's important, we get emotionally wound up in it. And when we're faced with food or situations around food that we think we shouldn't be eating, whereas a bloke would go, oh, I better not have that, or I'm not hungry, and they won't care. Women will think, no, I mustn't have that, it's bad for me, it's bad for me. And they'll fret about it and get anxious about it and be what's the word? I can't. But anyway, so put off by it and so on. So, you know, it is very, very different. And then there was a paper out at the, oh gosh, when was it? The Diet Fits study, which was, and there was a paper out, there's sort of a secondary analysis out about it in December, sort of November, late last year. And that was looking at the difference in men and women eating both a low fat or a low carb diet. Do you remember that one?
Oh no, interesting. Oh, I'll have to have a look.
Well, I have to say Zoe Harcombe wrote about it in one of her Monday notes. So that's what made, but in there she found some of the same things. And it was around, what you had to do in the study was everybody had to stick, whether they were in the low fat or the low carb arms, you had to stick to 20 grams of carbohydrate a day or 20 grams of fat a day or 20% of your intake from, or whatever it was. And you had to stick to that really closely for 8 weeks. And then after that, for the rest of the year, you had to try and moderate it, get it to a stage where you felt that you could cope with it, that it was sustainable.
Yeah.
And I can't remember all the details, but obviously most people increased their carbohydrate or their fat. But the people who maintained their weight loss were the ones, unsurprisingly, that kept closer to the original sort of low levels. But she did find a really significant difference between the men and the women, even with low carb. The men on low carb had the greatest success in compliance and the biggest weight loss. Yeah. But the women in low carb had the worst compliance, and they were much more likely to not lose as much weight.
How interesting, yeah.
And you know, so it wasn't, but I can't remember, it wasn't down to the compliance of the whole thing. It was down, basically it was down to, you know, Zoe has done a secondary analysis on it, and it really ought to be written up. I hope it does get written up, because she looked at calories and percentage of weight loss from calories. Yeah. And of course, it wasn't anything to do with calories. The people that ate the lowest amount of their diet from carbohydrate were the ones that managed to stick. But there was this gender divide again.
So for people that don't know, Zoe Harcombe is a researcher in the field and has done her PhD on was the evidence there for us going low fat back in the 70s, and I'll put a link onto the blog as well, because she is the most incredible brain in this field probably. Yeah, so we need to hear about the research that you've done during lockdown, helping people via Zoom. That's, as you say, it's just been published open access in the BMJ, which is brilliant. So tell us how did that come about, and what were your findings?
Well, I have to say, I never set out to publish research, but it's just an opportunity. And you know, if you find something that's useful or interesting, or might be useful or interesting to somebody else, it's just an opportunity to try and get it out there in the literature. So I have to say, with the research, you know, around the weight loss and lifestyle that has just been published in the BMJ Nutrition, we didn't set out to do that as a research project. It was a public health collaboration course that loads of ambassadors do all the way around the country and have done for the last 3 or 4 years. It's just that we managed to write this one up, so that's the only difference. We didn't do anything particularly special, but it was a low carb course.
Can I just say to everyone that's listening, you're being so it's so hard to publish a paper. So no, really, really hats off. Anyone who's ever tried, it's a complicated thing. It takes months of your life, doesn't it? And it's that in a way that's impressive, and you've done it twice now. So more power to your elbow. Hopefully we can all keep doing that, because I think it does legitimize. It's all very well and good, isn't it, saying I've done this little thing and it shows this, but if it's actually peer reviewed and in a paper, I think people take notice. I think it is another way that we can it's not something everybody can do, but if some of us can do that, I think it is another way to just keep increasing the evidence base. So sorry I cut in there, everybody. It was because I felt Lou really needs recognition for how hard it is to get a paper published in an academic paper. So carry on.
Oh, thanks, Jen. But no, it is, but that's exactly it. We just have to get it out there. And there's another whole conversation about different types of evidence and, are anecdotes and case studies important? Well, I think they are. They're evidence. So that's another project.
That's how we started, that's how we started.
Exactly. But yes, so I was going to start running a low carb lifestyle course for a local PCN, primary care network, group of GP surgeries, and along came COVID. And so I said, never mind, when you're sorted out, we'll do it online. And I didn't know how to do it online, but we did. And so fantastically supportive GP that was helping me, and my co-author, and Natalie Smith, and she was right behind it. So we ran a course of 6 90-minute sessions on Zoom, once every 2 weeks. And we covered things like a low carb approach to eating, or real food approach to eating. And we also looked at exercise and fasting and gut health, and how to get good sleep, and how to reduce your stress levels, and how all of those things contribute to your health and keeping your insulin levels down, so that it might be easier for you to lose weight and reverse all sorts of conditions. And what we also measured, because this is just something I always do with my clients and with groups, it's a personal interest, but we also measured their mental well-being. So I've got a validated questionnaire used to measure their mental well-being. And at the end of it, yes, people lost weight. And these were all another co-author, Christine Delon, who is another PhD, but I know she's worked on with you and David on some of your papers, and she's phenomenal. But she crunched some numbers. I did a bit of amateur number crunching, but she really did it properly, and we had statistically significant results for weight loss, waist circumference, BMI, blood pressure, which was really exciting because we only had 20 people, and they couldn't all go and get their blood tests done. They couldn't. But the 7 people who had blood pressure monitors at home measured their blood pressure, and their blood pressure came down, and that was statistically significant. HbA1c wasn't significant, but again, we only had 7 people, but it all came down. And so was mental well-being improvement. And I thought, do you know what? We're in the middle of COVID. Weight is going up. We know that weight is a problem. Excess weight is a problem for COVID complications and risk. We know that people's anxiety has gone up and mental ill health has increased. And yet we've got this really straightforward, light touch program where ordinary people have just taken a punt and joined in, and yet they've got fantastic results. So I just thought it was worth sharing with GPs and healthcare practitioners, mainly in primary care, but anybody really, to show that actually it's not complicated. You don't have to have a really big in-depth intervention that costs loads of money. You can do it we had old people, we had young people, we didn't have young people, people in their 40s, but we had people who had been diabetic for 25 years, who reduced their insulin by 100 units a day, So, so the message was, look what we can do with a really straightforward program, and look what difference it can make. So to all you GPs out there, don't give up hope. You're not able to see people, you're not able to do brief interventions and help refer people to weight management programs. No worries, you can do it on Zoom. And there's a whole movement, within primary care around group consultations or shared medical appointments, and really that's what this is. It's a load of people all working together and sharing their successes and helping each other along. And
I really love groups. People have heard me say, I just think there's an extra magic when you put people in a group together, because they're supporting each other. They want to kind of motivate each other. They want to share their results, and it kind of spurs everybody on, and they see other people doing well, and that's very uplifting. And it's all about hope, isn't it? At the end of the day, it's all about that, and hope and well-being, that kind of real interconnection between those two.
It is just so powerful. I was running another course last night, and you'll have seen this so often. I mean, I'm not a clinician. I'm in no position to advise people or tell people what to do. We share information so that people can make an informed decision about what they're going to do for their health. So it's about empowerment and giving them a bit of understanding so they understand what's going on, and they can make some good decisions for themselves, which means that it's wonderful if you've got a group situation, isn't it, where you're thinking you want to say to somebody, well, just do that and it's going to help you. But what's more powerful is some of the other people in the group say, oh, why don't you try this, or it really helped when I did that.
It's genius. You can just sit back and the group does the work. It's absolutely magic. No,
really powerful.
No, that's brilliant. And we definitely need more of that. And that, again, that's a good thing about the PHC, because the more ambassadors we can train, the more groups that can run. And what's great is that you've shown that can be Zoom. It makes it more accessible for people who, not just because of COVID, but for other reasons, maybe not have the time to come into a practice or sort of take part. So it just sort of opens it up. So it's important that we know what next. There's bound to be something, I know, because you're so full of these brilliant kind of, that's you, I think, isn't it? It's like, what's the next thing? So
I know, and I wish it wasn't sometimes. I'm knackered.
Take a rest. Is that the next thing?
Well, you do need to stop and recharge your batteries a bit.
100%. Yes.
Yeah. But you can recharge your batteries in all sorts of ways. One of the things that I'm interested in at the moment, I mean, certainly now that the research is out there in the BMJ research about the groups, I am going to set up, I'm approached all the time with, can I come on one of your courses?
Yeah.
And so that, I will be setting up courses for anybody in the country. Great opportunity with Zoom. You can be in Timbuktu, but you can still join in a course, run by somebody in the UK. So that's definitely on the cards. But there's another project where I sort of feel, my husband said you have to go where the energy is, and at the moment my energy is in, I think it's in trying to collect together the experiences of anybody that's had a positive outcome from low carb or real food or something like that. All the N=1s, all the anecdotes, all the case studies, whether it's around, because and I know that there's lots of people who have put their type 2 diabetes into remission, or they have lost weight, and that's fantastic. But there are so many other conditions and ways in which low carb or real food might be the starting point for all sorts of other things going right. And I would love to, I'm taking steps to collate them all, whether into one place, whether that's a website or a book or both. But I've already got quite a few stories in that, about people putting various autoimmune diseases into remission, or sorting out their depression.
Mental health is very powerful for mental health. Yeah. Yeah,
absolutely. And
brilliant.
people don't understand. This is there's another thing. I try to make any courses or interactions I do with people, I try to help people realize that they are in control. There are things they can do. It's great to understand the theory, but if you can translate that into some actions, some positive steps, however small, but something that you can do that might make a difference, which then you can build on.
Yeah.
So it's about, things you can do. And I think this comes a lot from what you and David have done around hope and noticing, and your grin model is fantastic. And the solution focused therapy, that's really important. So that empowerment thing, but I think, getting people's anecdotes in about different ways in which changing their food has helped them solve anything, I would love to know, because if we can collect them into one space, somehow, then there they are for for other people to see and be inspired by. But it's evidence. It's evidence.
I love that. That's brilliant. What a great goal. My final question is only because I'm interested in a minute. I'm just writing a blog on kind of music and the power of music to sort of change our mood in the moment. When people often ask, how do you, when you really want that piece of cake, or but you don't want it, but you're really craving it, and how can you kind of break out of that that kind of well-worn path of just the arm reaching for it. And I think in the early days of people giving up sugar, particularly those of us who really have a proper sort of addictive relationship with it, that can be a problem. So I'm kind of musing on the role of music that might help us in some way. Have you got a favorite track?
Which I was wondering where that was going.
Uplifting, and I mean, maybe you haven't, but I'm just asking everyone if they've got maybe if you want to sort of up your mood. Do you ever do that? Do you ever use music? Or
I love music, and I was really musical at school, and my daughter is a musician, and my son's a musician, and music. But I hardly ever play it. It's so strange. I'm surrounded. I miss my daughter being at home because the house was always full of her various instruments.
You don't run to music. I mean, I don't always run to music because sometimes I want to be a bit meditative. But if I'm trying to go a little bit faster, I do find that music really helps that. Is that something you used to do? Because you're obviously a massive runner.
Well, I have been. I'm not now so much, but no, I've been. So this is a complete cop out, because I honestly couldn't sort of come up with any sort of musical thing, and I'm really cross actually that I can't. But I have to say, sometimes when I was running and I was training, I used to put together a track of a tape or a list of music that had the right sort of beat, and it would uplift, just make you feel so good. So
what would you hear now that would remind you of that, or that would, is there one, some of my running tunes, if they come on the radio, I literally feel like kind of running, it's so ingrained that you feel you want to get going.
Honestly, oh golly, I mean,
don't worry.
There were so many. I mean, Body Pump I love, and I haven't been able to do that for ages and whatever, but some of those Body Pump tracks, and they come out quite, a lot of them are very uplifting when you're doing something like squats or something, or some vile ab track or something, and they'll have these amazing bits of music. I mean, I Will Survive. Oh no, it's Raining Men. This is embarrassing. I remember that from 20 years ago. It's Raining Men.
And on my running list. It's hilarious. I love it. It's so uplifting.
It is. And every time I hear it, I want to start doing squats and stuff, because it just makes me think of being energetic and doing something. So there you go. I mean, I have to say that's not my go-to, and I've been scrabbling around trying to think. My mind's gone
you can email me later when you think of it.
All right.
Yeah. Well, I like that one. That's great. Oh, well, Lou, thank you so much for your time. That's been of interest for people. It's definitely been of interest for me. And as I say, we'll put all the links when I put the podcast up. So, and I'm sure we'll talk again. So thank you so much.
Oh, I hope so. And can I give you a link so that if people have got a story to tell about that they're happy to share,
Yes.
you know, I've got a website, not a website, an email for that as well. So I
Yeah.
would love.
Oh no, 100%. Yes, yes, we'll do that,
Brilliant.
and I'll help you with that on social media, obviously. So
Thank you. That's brilliant.
right.
Okay, Jen.